I have a Bible this morning. You can open in that Bible to the book of Matthew. Can you hear me okay? Is my croaky voice coming out there with some strength? Matthew chapter 18. Today we go through our last message in this series of messages that we have been working our way through in this Advent season here this year. This message is about the children of Christmas, the children of Christmas. And if you have your Bibles open to the book of Matthew chapter 18, we'll be looking at just this one verse. Verse number 3. He says this, or it says this, I should say. And he, speaking of Jesus, said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. But back to the point, Christmas is for children. Those that are actually children, I think that that's quite obvious for. The excitement and just the glee that they get out of the holiday is evident to all. But it's also for, I think, those little girls and little boys that have long since grown up, whom the season brings out the vestiges of childhood in. I think when you look around at moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas, it's not too hard to see that rekindled glimmer in their eyes when you get into this holiday season, this season of Christmas. The little kid in them, the memory that they have, that little sentimental aspect that recalls past joys, kind of comes out, and everyone seems to have a little more of a childlike energy to their step, maybe a little more childlike grin to their smile. That's Christmas. It's a season for children. God has shown his matter, or his colors in this matter, mainly by this. In the very first Christmas, God came as a child himself. So it's not just us who, in our sentimentality and in just the glow that we have as moms and pops and grandmas and grandpas, it's not just us that have a special taste for the childlikeness of Christmas, but also God himself. In the stage of childhood, I think that being a baby is very important to God, not just because he came in that very first Christmas as a baby, but also for what he said in our text this morning. I mean, we can always know how important childhood is to God because Jesus came as a child. But we can also know how important childhood is to God because God calls for all of us, in light of the kingdom of heaven, in light of the gospel, to become like a child. Now, the major point of the text that I read to you, Jesus telling these first disciples, and us by extension, that we have to have the right mindset to enter the kingdom of God. We have to have the right mindset, not only to enter the kingdom of God, but to actually operate in the kingdom of God, to get things done in the kingdom of God, to see things done in the kingdom of God. We have to have the right mindset. And what Jesus is saying in our passage today is that that right mindset is that of a child. He says that we have to change, as it says in the NIV here, to become like a child. The word in the original language is really a word that means turn. So it's not just about, turning or changing into something that's childlike for a moment, but it's about actually doing a 180, doing an about face, turning around and going in a new way, in a new direction. That's what he's calling for. And Jesus says that for us to enter into the kingdom of God, to see achievement in the kingdom of God, to see blessing in the kingdom of God, to see the kingdom of God accomplish the things in us it's meant to, or for us to experience the things that are available to us in the kingdom of God. Jesus is saying that we must do a 180, to turn from, the direction that we have in life, to turn from our approach to it, to turn from our thinking about things in the way that we think about them, and to go a different way. Now, all of our lives, perhaps you heard this many times in your life. I know I did. We're told that we have to grow up. Has anyone ever told you that? Hey, you better grow up. I've heard that from moms and a dad, a mom and a dad. I've heard it from a grandma. I've heard it from a few aunts. I don't know that I heard it from any uncles. I heard it from a lot of teachers. Can't say I was the best of students. But we're told to grow up. In some respect in life, the way that we see things as, just your average human being, is that, being grown up is the way to operate. Being a grown up is how we get things done. Being a grown up is how we achieve and how we accomplish. Being a grown up is what we need to do, but here's Christ, and he's basically giving us the exact opposite message. The world tells us to grow up, and Christ tells us to grow down. What are we supposed to make of that? Well, I think that there's certainly a couple of thoughts that I'd like to share with you. I was going to say, if I may, but I'm going to, whether you give me permission or not, right? There's a couple of thoughts that maybe I can give to you regardless. And just look at the nature of childhood. Now, one of the things that's often pointed to is, in dealing with this particular passage and what Jesus is trying to say here, is you often hear it taught that what Jesus is actually saying to us is that somehow or another, children are very trusting. And so we have to come to a childlike trust. And that's what this is getting to. And I've been around the block. I have 5 kids in my home. I have 9 grandkids now. Seen a lot of other kids. And I just don't think that that's valid. Because I want to tell you, a lot of little kids I've seen, a lot of little babies and a lot of little toddlers, they're not very trusting at all. If you don't know that child and you come, get your face into their space, man, they're likely to hide behind somebody or run the other way or start crying. When people say we have to have the trust of a child, I think, what children are you looking at? The children I look at aren't trusting at all. The children I look at are, they have trepidations, right? They're uncertain. They don't know if they trust you. They don't know you from Adam, really. And that's the way kids are. So this can't be what Jesus is trying to say, is that we have to become trusting like a child. Because if we were trusting like a child, we would hide behind the corner someplace, hide in the shadow someplace, and only peer out slightly. Maybe only dabble our foot into the water a little bit. Did you do that when you were a kid? Did you go to the pool? Were you not trusting? Did you just put a toe in there? You know what I did when I went to the pool as a child? I just ran across whatever the pavement was and jumped right on in there. Now they say you shouldn't do that when you're older. You might give yourself a heart attack. I didn't worry about that as a kid. Now I just don't swim. It seems like it's a pretty easy solution to the problem. But anyhow, it seems to me that it's very clear, just from experience with children, that children are not, in some sense, more trusting than adults. Children are not by nature trusting, whereas adults are not, therefore. we have to change to become like children because then we'll be trusting. That just isn't getting the message. That's just not getting to the nugget, if you will. So what is getting to the nugget? Well, let me just say this. The one thing I have noticed about children, and I would say about babies, and even little toddlers, is that they might not trust you, but they'll trust another baby. Right? You put two little babies in a room, it's not too long before they noticed each other. And they'll start smiling at each other. Maybe they'll start cooing at each other. You put two little toddlers in a room, it's not like they go to their separate corners. Sometimes that happens. But I tell you what, just as often as not, what you'll see is the next thing you know, man, they're together. They're playing together. And if they're two boys, they're wrestling. Or kicking on things and beating things down, seeing, how tall they can build something and then knock it down. Boys. I had 4 boys, But anyhow, the whole point I'm making about all this is there is somebody that children are trusting toward. And they seem to be so innately. It doesn't seem like you really have to work that hard at this. Some kids will still be a little shy around another child. But kids are more trusting of other kids than they ever are of adults, particularly if they're dealing with someone who's a stranger. And so there's something that I think might have some mileage in it as far as looking at what Jesus might have been trying to get to when he told us to be childlike. He wasn't telling us to be childlike in the sense that, children are these absolute paragons of trust. And so if we become childlike, we will have, trust like they do. That's not what he's getting to. I think what he's getting to is just this, is when you're a child, you'll trust another child. And that's really where all of this ties back to Christmas, is it not? I said, Christmas is all about children. It's a holiday for kids, by kids, of kids. All the stuff that Abraham Lincoln said about America, only about Christmas and kids instead of, everyone else. Christmas is about kids, and Jesus was a kid in that very first Christmas. And the one thing that I've always found most engaging about Christmas as an adult is when I think about this amazing wonder that the all-knowing, all-powerful God stepped into our realm in such a helpless, vulnerable package. And it wasn't just a package that, it's not like Jesus was looking to strip off his outfit, strip off his mask, jump out in his almighty glory and say, ta-da! That's not how he came. He came emptied of divine glory and divine power and splendor, came fully engaged, fully in to being a child, put into the hands of his mother and his supposed father to be cared for, to be protected. Think about the story that we have of Christmas. Mary and Joseph are warned that the child is in danger. Right? What do? They flee to Egypt. Why do they do that? Well, it's just all part of the totality, the fullness with which Christ entered childhood. He became as real a child as a child can be. He became as real a human being as a human being can be. He faced the experience that is human in the fullest possible way that he could. And here's the thing, is when I look, as a matter of speaking, at the baby Jesus, I think I begin to understand what he's asking for from me in turning to become a child. Baby to baby, we can relate. toddler to toddler, we can understand each other. Child to child, the wonder of his love and what he wants to do in my life can be understood in a trusting way. So it's not so much that we want to turn into children because they are the paragons of trust, but we want to turn into children so that we can meet the child Christ in that space and at that moment. And in that space and moment, be touched by the power of one so mighty and so knowledgeable and so overwhelming and so transcendent, stepping into our lives in such a vulnerable, such a hapless way or helpless way, in a way that we can relate to, and in a way that doesn't scare us. God's a scary thing. He is, when you think about it, sufficiently. Somebody who's not a little bit frightened of God is not a person who's thought about things very deeply. Right? I mean, even if it's not your conceptions of God and your thoughts about theological things that will get you there, certainly we all have some concept of what goes on in life. Life is difficult. It is filled with incredible challenges. And we're never assured as we face them that they're going to come out okay. I mean, no matter what that challenge is, right? I mean, we have to face it in the space that we face it in. Time-bound as we are by it. And vulnerable. It's scary. And when the kind of things that happen in this world happen, you know, some people will say, how can a loving God let this happen? You see, what we need, it seems to me, to get past all the scariness of all those thoughts and the things that go with them, is to see Christ the infant. Christ the one vulnerable and weak and lowly. Christ coming to meet us in a state that can communicate to us trust, love, care. And the thing about it is, for us to actually hear the message, we've got to be of the same mind. We have to be in the same mindset. So when Jesus says that we must turn and become like children, I think this is what he's getting to. We have to get over ourselves. Get over all of the occupations of our heart and mind with trying to do and achieve and be that we have in this world. Get over all those adult concerns, you know, that have been so pressed upon us all through our lives. You have to grow up. You have to grow up. You know, life is rough. You've got to be able to meet the responsibility. Blah, 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 blah. Not that all those things are bad. We understand how life works. But when it comes to meeting God, when it comes to meeting God in a way that actually makes a connection, that actually ties you into a sense of trust and love, the child in you, the child that you become by faith, has got to meet the child who is Christ. And child to child, let the bond of trust be established and grow from that point. In order to enter the kingdom of God, we must turn and become like children. Because in becoming like children before God, we're actually able, all the clutter, all the barriers, all the distractions, all the things that are obstacles get pushed out of the way. And we're able, in a childlike, pristinely pure way, to look at Jesus and trust him. Today, let me just ask you this. Are you a child?